outside, it honestly looks like a dark Hansel and Gretel kind of house.
Your dog. Okay, mean? They're not friendly.
As soon as you walk into the house, the hair stands up on the back of your neck. It's pretty creepy. It really was.
I've come to this remote part of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It seems haunting, but maybe that's because this is where the mystery unfolds.
There's more media attention to our missing person, Chris Reagan.
This doesn't look like Chris is in town now. It's all disrupted. He was always very neat. Everything was always put away.
And no signs of forced entry or chaos.
Absolutely not. Something happened to him. I knew that in my heart, and I knew that in my gut. He had another side to him.
So immediately, this is a lover's triangle.
How many guys have you actually seen? And my husband, Eric, and Chris.
Not a love triangle, but a love quadrangle.
Tell me something, you guys.
What happened to Chris Reagan?
That's the stuff of horror movies.
The Upper Peninsula is kind of its own little world.
The Upper Peninsula is also known as the UP. People are Upers.
Upers are unique people.
The Upper Peninsula is separated by the Mackinac Bridge from Lower Michigan.
It's in absolute rural, forested woodland, and kind of terrifying in its isolation.
We can get wind chill readings 30 below zero in the wintertime.
It looks like the Arctic sometimes. And, you can kind of feel lost.
One town in the Upper Peninsula is the small town of Iron River, which was named because of the local mining.
Iron River, Michigan has a population of about 3,000 with one stoplight in their town.
My name is Laura Frizzo, and I'm the former police chief of Iron River. And also the first female police chief actually to serve in the entire Upper Peninsula. It was a lot of double takes when I first started with some of the old timers who were like, what's going on here? The people of Iron River are really good-hearted people, accepting. But I think when someone new comes to the area, they're a little skeptical at first, and they take their time to make sure that you're worthy of being included into their little circle.
One of those outsiders who came to live in Iron River was 51-year-old Chris Reagan.
We had to actually go up and buy him all new clothes, is what he called his duper clothes, because he had city clothes.
Terry O'Donnell was an old flame of Chris Reagan's, and the two had recently rekindled their romance.
He decided that he was going to move to Iron River so that we could be closer together. It was a whirlwind. God, I was so in love with him. Christopher and I used to come down out Apple Blossom Trail and then walk around the river. We'd sit, listening to the water. Just enjoy time together.
So when Chris moved to Iron River, he got a job at a manufacturing company called the Oldenburg Group.
Chris was very meticulous about things. Probably one of our best team leaders that we had. He was actually holding people accountable.
Chris was former military and had a reputation as a reliable worker. So it came as a bit of a surprise when he didn't show up for his job. That was October 14th.
I sent a message to Chris. We haven't heard from you. Is everything okay? Chris had missed 2 days, and one of my team leaders came forward and told me, Laura, just so you know, Chris had applied for another position, and he's moving to North Carolina.
You know, if he was doing long hours for a pretty demanding company, then maybe he just said enough of that.
After 3 days, no call, no show is termination.
Remarkably, 2 whole weeks had gone by and no one had heard from Chris. That's when Terry decides to go to the police. By this time, the two had broken up, but they remained close friends and talked regularly.
I saw this vehicle pull up and park in front of the police department. And I saw this woman get out of the vehicle, and she was crying. And she said that her friend was missing.
I was shaking, I had tears.
What was that interaction like when you first encountered Terry O'Donnell?
She was very upset. You know, clearly she knew something wasn't right because she knew him very well.
Chief Frizzo sent Sergeant Cindy Barrett to investigate. First stop, Chris Reagan's apartment.
Terry O'Donnell's parents are landlords to Chris Reagan. So Terry had access via key from her parents.
This doesn't look like Chris's apartment, no. It's all disheveled. But he was always very neat. Everything was always put away.
It was evident that he was in the process of packing up to move to his new job. There's packing boxes, and on the bed there were suitcases. And there was papers there for his new job.
This is his paperwork to accept the position. It's not even sent yet. His calendar shows that he was going to resign on the 14th. He has the 23rd as the last day of work.
So not a guy who's running away.
Absolutely not.
And no signs of forced entry or chaos.
Not at all. In fact, he had a list started, you know, things that he wanted to get ready for his move.
It said he has everything that he needs to do to move. All of his notes.
And on the dining room table were legal pads with to-do lists, like call the power company to shut the power up. It really started to bother me that something was very, very wrong.
Now was his window left open? The windows were left open.
It appeared that he had left the apartment with full intentions of returning.
Something happened. I knew that in my heart, and I knew that in my gut.
And I said, we're going to go out and we're going to check the car. And when we're done with that, I will enter Chris Reagan as a missing person in the national database.
From there, they went to the park and ride where Terry had seen Chris's car abandoned for days.
Christopher's Hyundai Genesis, his vehicle, was there. And that was his baby. He took such good care of it. And so it didn't make sense to me that it was at the park and ride.
When Sergeant Barrett went to take a look at the car, she found, you know, a couple things in the car, like his knee brace that he should have been wearing.
Man's knee brace? Yep. Do you normally wear the knee brace? Okay.
And I understand in the car there was an intriguing post-it note.
Yeah, she found like a post-it note that was flipped upside down on the passenger side. We didn't know at first what was written on it and what it would come to mean later.
Christopher always wrote things down on Post-its, and the Post-it note had directions on it. And I told her that wherever those directions went to, that was the last place he was.
This is believed to be the last known video of Chris Reagan. He's caught on a surveillance camera at a gas station on the afternoon of October 14th, 2014. Leading up the investigation into Reagan's disappearance is a new, inexperienced chief of police, Laura Frizzo.
She is a leader in a profession in the Upper Peninsula where there aren't a lot of female leaders.
How many people on the force?
4 full-time.
She truly cared and she truly wanted to solve this.
As Chief Frizzo investigates Chris Reagan's disappearance, she discovers that he had dated multiple women in his short time in Iron River, and some of those relationships overlapped.
I dated Chris Reagan back in 2013 from around May till the end of October for about 6 months. He would always send me a text weekly. He was very suave, very sweet, charismatic, just kind of knew how to make you feel good.
As far as Terry O'Donnell knew, she thought that she was in an exclusive relationship with Chris, and this behavior came as a real shock to her.
I asked him why, he was doing that. And he said, well, you're going to be gone to Europe for 3 weeks. What happens if I get lonely? So, sadly to say, I broke it off with him.
When Chief Frizzo digs deeper into Chris's life, she discovers another woman he'd been dating, a 33-year-old co-worker by the name of Kelly Cochran.
Either one of us were all in. It was never going to be because I was married.
She was an employee at Oldenburg. Chris was actually involved in her hiring. Kelly was also new to town, and I think they bonded over that, being two city folk in this small town.
I would go over to Chris's and usually cook, and then, we were intimate, and then usually I would leave.
That Post-it note found inside Chris's car at this parking ride could have led to any one of his girlfriend's homes. Turns out, it was Kelly Cochran's.
Chief Frizzo had told me to go and interview Kelly Cochran to see if she had any information as to the whereabouts of Chris Reagan, and a man came out. So I said, are you Kelly Cochran's husband? And he said, yes. I said, is Kelly home? And he says, no, Kelly's not home. I don't know where she is. And shortly thereafter, this woman comes out. I asked her if she was Kelly. She said, yes, I'm Kelly. It's not unusual for a husband or a wife to say, no, he's not here. That is very common. I was actually surprised she came out. So I said, is your husband aware of your relationship with Chris Reagan? She says, oh, yes, he's fine with it. Jason Cochran is standing there just stoically not saying a word, just like a statue. No emotion. She says, I figured Chris left for North Carolina without saying goodbye to me. So I told her, I said, we were wondering why the car was at the park and ride. And Kelly Cochran said, in the past tense, he loved that car.
And Sergeant Barrett called me afterwards and said, I found that to be very chilling and odd that she said, past tense, he loved that car.
Because of her tiny department's limited resources, Chief Frizzo asked for help from the Michigan State Police. They sent 2 detectives who questioned the Cochrans the very next day.
And I'll tell you guys in advance, I see a therapist for high anxiety.
I'm listening to Jason Cochran's interview with the detective. He immediately, there's no questions asked even yet. And he's like, I just want to let you know that I haven't been doing too well lately.
I actually was institutionalized a little over a month ago, so, okay, if I seem like I'm getting wound up, I do see a therapist for it. Lost a close friend, and I've been depressed ever since.
Did you think that's what caused all your
issues? A huge part of it.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, knowing that my marriage is falling apart.
So you were very much aware of what Kelly was doing?
I either had to accept it or to let her go. So I decided that I could at least accept it for a little while and see if it's, what she really wanted was to not be with me, and then I was going to let her go.
Kelly, right? Yes, Katie-L-L-Y.
When Kelly came in for her interview, the one thing I noticed about her right out of the gate was her ability to control her body language.
Tell us everything you know about Chris. Basically got pretty close for the last 4 months. like a best friend.
Did you have an intimate relationship?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And obviously your husband knows.
He knows who he is.
She was leaning forward, she had eye contact, and her voice was calm and collected the whole time.
When was the last time you saw Chris?
I would say between the 12th and the 15th was the last time I saw him.
Where did you see him?
I seen him at his apartment, I think.
Was Jason upset about that?
No.
Kelly, should we be looking at Jason?
I don't see why you would.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because husbands get jealous.
I understand that.
Who do you think would have hurt Chris?
I don't think anybody would hurt him. I would like to know what happened as well. That's why I'm willing to be here. I'm a good person.
Despite the love triangle between the Cochrans and Chris Reagan, there's still no evidence of any crime being committed. But Chief Frizzo still suspects that Reagan's disappearance might be the result of foul play.
Frizzo and her small team continued pressing on, and they quickly learned that Kelly also had multiple relationships, including a gentleman who also worked at the Oldenburg Group. Kelly was dating another employee there by the name of Eric Erickson.
Eric's supervisor was Chris Reagan.
So now police are wondering, could Eric have been upset enough to have harmed Chris?
How would you feel about taking a polygraph test just to prove that you didn't have anything to do with Chris's disappearance?
As Chief Laura Frizzo is investigating the disappearance of Chris Reagan, she discovers evidence of not a love triangle, but a love quadrangle. Even though Kelly Cochran is married to Jason, she is having an affair with Chris and another co-worker, Eric Erickson.
Eric Erickson was hired as military assembler. Eric was a good employee. He showed up, he was dependable.
Eric was a suspect. Could he have done something to Chris because he was angry and jealous and outraged? So it was important to eliminate him. There was a point with the participation of the Michigan State Police detectives where I think they wanted to take more of a lead in the case and handle it.
There was no warning. It was just basically like, hey, Laura said they want to talk to you. And the next thing I know, they're coming at night, pulling up in my driveway, telling me to get in the car.
Thanks for coming. Did you also discuss that with Laura?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wanted me to go out with her a couple times, like at night. I think for me it was kind of fun. You know, at first, whatever. I had moved back here and I didn't know anybody, and having somebody give me some attention was kind of like, I liked it.
Right.
This too. I still have the full text message.
I said, yeah, here, take a look at my phone. This is our conversations that we've had.
When I looked at his conversations with Kelly, there was a point in time where he got very irritated with her. And it was the week before Chris went missing.
There was a time where we went down to the lake and we were going to have just a couple beers. Well, her phone was going off, right? And I'm like, you know, somebody's really trying to get a hold of you. Who is it? And she said that it's Chris, you know.
So maybe he was the jealous lover.
Yes, and I did think that it could happen.
The next step for Erickson? A polygraph, or a so-called lie detector test.
How would you feel about taking a polygraph test just to prove that you didn't have anything to do with Chris's disappearance?
Yep, I told him I would do that.
I scheduled a polygraph for him. We went over everything.
Yeah, I totally understand that.
All of a sudden the door goes click, and walks in, you know, the officer, and he goes, you passed. And I was like, I did? So...
And because of the alibi that he did check out, I was able to put him to the side and focus more on the Cochrans as the suspects.
So as you're doing your sort of criminal profiles, what made Jason a potential suspect in your mind?
Jason really had motive. You know, he was the husband who was being cheated on.
Our marriage has kind of been on rocky roads for a little while.
The story that I had gotten from Kelly was that they were separated, however, still living under the same roof.
What I came to learn about this marriage was that it had been in trouble for a while. Kelly, was living a life of a single person. She was constantly running around with different men.
There were times when she came home about 1:30, didn't even tell me where she was at, and I didn't really want to know. I hate to say it.
Do you kind of understand why you're here?
Yeah. I think so. There's somebody that's missing. I'm gonna guess that I'm probably the jealous husband.
As police start going through Jason's text messages, they seem to reveal how Jason really feels about being cheated on. He doesn't seem happy at all. Texting her, "I cannot take it," and "You promised me you would stop." Was that a lie also?
It wasn't long before Chris went missing. Jason found himself down by Chris's apartment and telling her, "Don't go to those apartments again, you're a married woman."
The guy in the cast says I was not the only guy trying to date you. Please don't go back to those apartments. You are married.
Your husband, did she confront you about the time when you said he was on a walk and you saw your truck parked by Chris's apartment?
He didn't mention that yet.
What did he say?
He didn't see my truck there.
Which sounds almost like stalking behavior.
Right. So I'm thinking, okay, he's now put himself in a position where he's made contact with Chris Reagan. I thought, maybe he snapped.
Things had boiled over, and Jason needed to go and get some help. Jason's admission to the mental hospital was 2 days after Mr. Reagan went missing.
Chief Frizzo now has some serious suspicion that Jason Cochran's got something to do with Chris Reagan's disappearance.
It started to get close to the holidays. Thanksgiving was approaching.
And then, out of the blue, Chief Frizzo gets a phone call that takes her by complete surprise.
And when I pick up the phone, the voice on the other end said, "Hi, this is Chris Reagan." And I almost dropped the phone and said, "Oh, where have you been?"
Winter is coming to the Upper Peninsula, and Chris Reagan is still missing. The investigation into his disappearance looks like it's growing cold too. But Iron River Police Chief Laura Frizzo remains convinced that Reagan was the victim of foul play. You thought maybe he's been murdered.
Yeah, I just thought something's wrong.
It seemed like everything was a dead end. I would stop and check with Laura and just ask her how things are going. And then she'd say, "I was thinking about you."
Laura was very dedicated to the case. She knew that Chris had sons who wanted closure, and she wanted to be able to get that closure for them.
I was in the office and I got a phone call. And when I picked up the phone, the voice on the other end said, "Hi, this is Chris Reagan." And I almost dropped the phone because I thought, "Oh, yeah, where have you been?" And he said, "Junior, this is his son." And it was really sad for me to hear his voice. And it was even harder for me meeting him in person.
Chris Jr. is on his way to Iron River with his brother to clean out their father's apartment.
The first time I went to Iron River to clean out his apartment and stuff like that was not fun. I didn't know what to do or where to start.
It just was heartbreaking. They were young. They were lost. They didn't know what to do, where to go.
She knew that Chris was a veteran and that his military service was something he was really proud of. So she wanted to make sure that his son got his dog tags, which they recovered from his apartment.
I went to hand them to him and he told me, "I think you should just keep them with you." I carried those dog tags in my pocket every day.
This is a complicated case, and the Iron River Police Department is small, just 4 people. And as a result of that, people offered their help.
So you think these profile questions are pretty good?
Jim McNeil and Molly Barron worked together as private investigators, and we got together after being introduced by a high school friend of mine who's like a mutual friend.
I feel it is a tight community where everybody seems to know each other. And especially if you have a missing person, that's concerning to the community.
Because of where we're from, we just don't have missing people like that. We're not gonna not do anything when somebody's missing.
It was at this point where the prosecutor was ready to sign the search warrant for the Cochran residence. So Molly and Jim show up at my office, and I'm like, oh, well, as a matter of fact, I said, I'm going to be doing a search warrant there tomorrow.
On March 16th, 2015, Chief Frizzo goes to the Cochran's house with the long-awaited search warrant, accompanied by those two private investigators.
The dogs were just going crazy in there, like just barking.
The two dogs?
Okay, are they mean?
They're not friendly.
We were in the home, and Kelly's home is pretty creepy. It really was.
Stop.
And what I have, Kelly, is my search warrant.
I think Molly and I brought, a lot of experience there to her to assist her with the search warrant.
I've never worked with a PI like that before. That was my first experience.
This is a little unorthodox.
It is, and I was kind of concerned about it when it first happened because I'm kind of a control freak and I didn't want anyone messing around, but it actually worked out to our advantage. Hi, Jason. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Okay.
One of the first things you want to be very careful of is weapons. Do you have any weapons in the home?
Not on us, but I was in the house.
Tell me where they
I've got a 22 under there. To be able to reach right in and get it.
And you immediately go to these weapons and secure them.
Central 200, we're secure.
And they had all kinds of weapons that were like all over the place. But that's not illegal,
Jason had a fetish with knives, swords, things like that, and he had a lot of them that were found and collected during the search warrant.
It was the kind of arsenal you see in a movie.
He had swords, crossbows. Everywhere you go in that home, you can put your hands on something tangible and use it as a weapon. That was a very eerie feeling.
Do you want a jacket or something? Typically, you don't allow the residents to stay in the house. They're going to have to leave.
You guys aren't going to turn the computer off, are you?
No. Okay. Is there something on there you don't want us? No. She's working on something? Okay. It happened to be one of the coldest mornings of the winter. It was like 0.
as soon as you walk into the home, there's like a punch hole of some sort through the door, and the door frame was awry. It was cracked or something.
At that point, Laura calls the crime lab. Hey, let's get the crime lab here. And we're standing there for quite a while waiting for that crime lab.
So we're just standing there waiting, and I looked up.
Is that what you said?
And something caught my eye, and I looked at it again, and I kind of stepped to the side, and I looked at it again, and the ceiling was white, but there was these certain spots up there. So I finally said something to Jim, and then Jim looked up and looked at it, and immediately was like, ooh.
To the private investigators, those spots on the ceiling look suspiciously like painted over blood.
It's like a splatter pattern.
She said, yeah, we've done remodeling and replaced the ceiling tiles. That's probably where the cast off is.
It could have happened right here.
It's already dark by the time the crime lab unit gets there.
Tell me something, you guys.
Okay, well, let's step in here. We got a positive reaction with the luminol on the ceiling here.
They bring in luminol, which is a chemical that detects the presence of blood.
Right here. And then there was something over here in this area.
They did get a positive reaction from that area above the doorway, where it looked like something happened right under the door and kind of spread as it went back on the ceiling. And they said that they got a positive reaction from that. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. I'm sorry. We had finished the search warrant at approximately like 10 o'clock at night, so it's late.
Investigators think that they have uncovered a gold mine of evidence against the Cochrans until something shocking happens the next day.
I got a phone call from one of the neighbors in the morning and said, I just want to let you know that they totally loaded up their truck and skipped town.
The Cochrans have disappeared.
Tell me something, you guys. We found a couple areas of interest. Excellent.
When investigators get the warrant to search the Cochran's home, they find a litany of disturbing items, including battle axes, crossbows, daggers and knives, a shotgun, a .22 caliber pistol. But more important than that is what appears to be blood spatter.
We got a positive reaction with the luminol.
You're telling me that's blood, right?
We haven't confirmed it yet.
It was looking pretty good that they were going to get some positive results back.
At this point in the investigation, Chief Frizzo feels like she's got a lot of evidence on the Cochrans. Until the very next morning, she gets a call from one of the neighbors.
And that neighbor calls in the morning and said, I just want to let you know that they totally loaded up their truck and skipped town. So I knew this was happening.
What was your reaction?
I was worried a little bit just because I was the one that was kind of the thorn in their side. And so I wanted to be sure they weren't gonna, look for me or come over and find me.
Todd and David Saylor, the neighbors who reported the Cochrans missing, are brought in for questioning. They tell police about another very interesting detail they say they observed around the time of Chris Reagan's disappearance.
According to David, the Cochrans started renovating their house, but not during the day. You could hear them in their basement using power tools for multiple nights.
You guys had heard them using these standing tools and stuff, and you figured that was when?
Right around October. Sanding away, sanding, and a suitcase saw, skill saw.
And they were doing it at odd times?
Real odd, like 2, 3 in the morning, you're working all night.
And so what went through your mind when you heard that?
The worst thing imaginable. And I thought, that can't be. But at the same time, with what they're telling me, it makes sense.
That's the stuff of horror movies.
Yeah.
Also seemingly out of a horror movie, a chilling discovery Chief Frizzo later makes inside the Cochrans' basement. A journal written by Jason.
And he had titled it, Where Monsters Hide. Then he goes on to talking about being a hunter and how the hunter hunts the prey and feels this tingle through their body. And it's kind of eerie. Almost like he was writing about this situation.
It's almost like a thinly veiled confession.
Yes. It just again pointed in the direction of definitely this couple had something to do with his disappearance, and definitely Jason could have snapped.
Chief Frizzo is sure that the lab results from those blood samples taken from the house will prove that Chris was brutally murdered there. But she's in for bitter disappointment.
When they called me and said, we didn't get anything. And they weren't good samples or had been treated with chemicals or whatever the case may be. And I remember just being so upset about that. I was mentally drained a lot.
With her main suspects now gone into the wind, the case seems to have hit a dead end. But then there's a break. It turns out that on the night before the Cochrans left town, those private investigators had put a tracking device on the Cochrans' truck, which is legal for PIs to do in the state of Michigan. What made you put the GPS tracker on?
Well, we were hoping that they would go to where the body was.
That's one of the most dangerous moments in the whole investigation, I feel, is deploying the GPS unit because of the risk of danger.
What does that danger look like? What does that feel like?
Like somebody coming out with the shotgun and shooting us on the spot.
Okay, you ready? Yeah. Right next to that spare tire is the back frame of the vehicle, and as I get closer, it just sucked it right out of my hand, and you hear the loud bang. It's an exciting moment. You can feel your heart beating through your chest. There's a lot of things that could go wrong at that moment in time.
I talked to Jim McNeil, and he said we put a GPS device on the truck, and I need to tell you that. I immediately did a search warrant for their GPS information so that we knew where the Cochrans were and what was going on.
We monitored the GPS movement all through exiting the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, through the state of Wisconsin, the top part of Illinois, there in Indiana, and then they ended up nearby within the Hobart area.
And sure enough, we located them. They were back at Kelly's parents' house in Hobart.
Chief Rizzo wants to get DNA samples from Kelly and Jason Cochran, but they're no longer in her jurisdiction. So she contacts the Lake County Sheriff's Department in Indiana.
When I spoke with her, we made a connection on the phone. She gave me all the reasons that she believed that this was a criminal case, and I believed her. We told Jason that we had a search warrant for his DNA and we needed to transport him to the Hobart Police Department. He did not say a word the entire time. He was just sitting in the back of the car, shaking and sweating and like wringing his hands together.
He's sitting in a room waiting to give his DNA swab, and then he gets the surprise of a lifetime.
Looked up at me, and his face just started to turn red immediately. That was a shock to his system, I'm sure. And my whole plan was to try and give him the opportunity to be the victim and to tell me what happened to Chris.
If you ever love me, you'd ask my wife. It says right in your messages, don't come back to the apartment. You're very woman. Do you remember saying that? Do you remember saying that?
I don't really feel like answering any questions. I feel like it's violated my constitutional rights and I'm a lawyer.
And in the meantime, actually, Kelly is just calling. She knows something's up. She's calling Jason's phone over and over again.
When Kelly Cochran saw Laura Frizzo, you could tell that seemed to be her nemesis.
So Jason was here for quite a while. And it took a while. But Jason told us to stop. The problem with you, Kelly, is that, I caught you in so many lies that I'm trying to give you an opportunity now to just say, hey, I f***ed up. I'm asking for a lawyer. Calm down with the questions. Okay. I'm fine doing the DNA. I told you before I'm fine doing the DNA. Okay, let's get this done.
So as I started to leave the room to get to the technicians to take her DNA, she said, "Where's my husband?"
Where's my husband?
And I just kind of looked back at her because I had kind of fed her a line that, Jason's already told us everything. We already know what happened.
What Laura effectively does is create distrust between the couple. And come February of 2016, that distrust is going to implode the Cochran household.
Lake County 911, operator 17.
A 911 call from Kelly Cochran comes in that could unravel the mystery of what happened to Chris Reagan.
He's not breathing. This is like slow. He's breathing barely. I don't know what's wrong. I need an ambulance right away.
Here we have one of the most sensational murders, but very few people have actually heard about this case. Some really heinous and atrocious crimes.
So what made you call the FBI?
I found the flyer on Chris Reagan being missing.
On this call, my instincts were just yelling at me that something's not right with the scene.
What makes the Caspian Pit such an excellent place to hide evidence?
The burn barrel was actually found by the divers just offshore here.
And back in these woods, an even more important discovery.
to figure out what's the best way to get somebody to tell you a secret that only they know.
I told you before, the witness would be a suspect.
It's almost like the two of them were having a chess game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think she wanted to play the game.
You were basically having to convince Kelly that her dead husband was sending a message from beyond the grave.
I'm not sure with you.
And the reason this case is so engaging, it's the amount of police video that's available. It's amazing.
The Kelly Cochran case, just it's the biggest case we've had maybe ever.
With her, it was like, lie, 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 truth. Lie, truth. Lie, 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 truth. You gotta figure it out.
The end of 2014, there was a missing man in the Iron River area. He wasn't found.
Chris Reagan is missing, and it is a mystery. Police Chief Laura Frizzo discovers that Reagan is romantically tied to a married co-worker, Kelly Cochran. She and her husband, Jason, are brought in for questioning.
Jason really had motive. You know, he was the husband who was being cheated on.
But as soon as he's in front of police, he falls apart. He's shaking, he's fumbling over his words.
I actually was institutionalized a little over a month ago where I get really flustered in that, so, okay.
When Laura and her team search the Cochran's home, they find a litany of weapons, from battle axes to shotguns. They find this blood spatter, and they find a manuscript written by Jason called Where Monsters Hide. The manuscript is this essentially fantasy-driven tale of a overlooked man, and it has various accounts of him and his wife killing people, and includes one that almost perfectly mirrors what happened with Chris Regan.
So at this point, investigators think that they have uncovered a gold mine of evidence against the Cochrans until something shocking happens the next day. The Cochrans have now disappeared.
When Jason and Kelly Cochran fled their home in Michigan's Upper Peninsula back in March of 2015, private investigators were already tracking their movements using a hidden GPS device. The final destination, their hometown of Hobart, Indiana.
Kelly and Jason were neighbors. They lived next door to each other all their lives.
I was trying to do what I thought was the right thing. You go to school, you go to college, you get married.
Kelly wore the pants in the family, so whatever she wanted, Jason did.
I got bored from getting married. It was okay at the start, but all I did was work.
She was wanting to help get their business, up and running and make more money.
Even though the Cochrans are now out of her jurisdiction, Chief Frizzo continues to investigate Chris Reagan's disappearance. She's now focused on a place known as the Caspian Pit. She enlists the help of a former police investigator, Michael Niger. What makes the Caspian Pit such an excellent place to hide evidence?
Well, it's deep, and also it's within a couple hundred meters of where the Cochrans lived, and be very easy to get to in the dark and drop something.
Were you able to dredge up a burn barrel? Was that here?
Yes, a burn barrel was actually found by the divers just offshore here.
There was a clothesline attached to this burn barrel with a cement block to it to weight it down. We found cement blocks in the backyard at Cochran's and the actual clothesline, which was missing.
I think the implication was that perhaps Kelly and Jason were burning Chris's body, or parts of it at least.
I was out in my garage, and what in the heck's that smell? And I walked across the street here, and she came running out of her yard and met me in the middle of the street. And I said, "What the hell are you burning?" And she said, "I'm burning some brush out there." I said, "Look, I lived up here my whole life, and I never smelled nothing like that."
The Cochrans had a fire pit, and there was a burn barrel that had been there. Once we sifted through that fire pit ash, we found a saw blade. We found the components to a pair of jeans, which was quite significant. We felt confident that this was likely their burn barrel. However, there was nothing in it, obviously. I mean, it was open in the pit, and anything that was in it would have washed out. Why did you need to get rid of it? So that was my validation anyway that we were on the right track.
But then, in February of 2016, back in Hobart, Indiana, there's a truly shocking development that's about to upend the entire case. A 911 call coming from the house where the Cochrans are living.
Wake County 911, operator 17. My husband is like 12. He's bleeding barely. I don't know what's wrong. He's throwing up. He's sweating. I need an ambulance right away.
Kelly calls 911.
Kelly calls 911 and says, you know, I need the ambulance here. My husband's barely breathing.
You said he's breathing, difficulty breathing? Barely.
On this call, my instincts were just yelling at me that something's not right with the scene. She seemed to kind of conveniently get in our way a lot, and she just didn't seem to have the proper reaction to finding her husband, in cardiac arrest.
I'm panicking, like I'm trying to, be of some use as much as I didn't want him in my life. I didn't want him dead.
Jason Cochran, unfortunately, was pronounced dead in the emergency room at St. Mary's.
After Jason died, Kelly reached out to his friend Walt to let him know that Jason had passed. And Walt was immediately concerned. Kelly's tone was very strange. Everything about it felt abrupt and staged. And with encouragement from his wife, Walt called the FBI.
So what made you call the FBI?
I found the flyer on Chris Regan being missing, and it had two numbers on there, the Iron River Police and the FBI. So I figured somebody should know that Jason's dead.
Do you remember what you told the FBI?
I told them that I have some friends that lived in the UP. They told me they're suspects, and one of them died Saturday.
The FBI routes the call to the proper jurisdiction, and it lands on the desk of Hobart Detective Sergeant Jeremy Ogden.
Jeremy Ogden had a reputation as an amazing investigator. Jeremy was known as a master interviewer.
I've never received a call like that before. I knew that I needed to make sure that Jason wasn't being taken to a funeral home rather than going for an autopsy.
It's not every day that a detective attends an autopsy. And so what did you learn in that particular one?
I learned that, Jason had petechial hemorrhaging around his eyes within his, the whites of his pupils.
And what does that point to?
Pressure and suffocation.
The autopsy results lead Ogden to take a deep dive into Kelly Cochran's background and Chris Regan's disappearance. So he connects with Chief Laura Frizzo from Iron River.
And then ultimately Laura sent me all of the documents and the videos.
Immediately I knew that this was going to work out well because he was on the same page, his thoughts, his words. It was like, oh my gosh, somebody else gets it. He gets it. He's thinking like I do, and that's rare.
What follows is a cat and mouse game between Detective Ogden and Kelly Cochran.
I didn't say you did anything.
As Ogden hatches a truly bizarre scheme to get Kelly to open up about what really happened to Chris Regan.
He decides to make a carving on the tree that will really freak her out when she sees it.
I thought maybe she would see it as a sign from the dead or maybe even something supernatural.
At this point, Jeremy Ogden is now leading the investigation into the Cochrans.
I'm running the case, and I'm doing all the things that I think are necessary.
Detective Ogden has what will be the first of many interrogations with Kelly Cochran at the Hobart Police Station following her husband Jason's death.
How you doing? Not an easy thing to go through.
Kelly has a lot to say about what happened to Jason, but when the conversation turns to Chris Regan, not so much.
I'm not trying to push you. I'm not at all. I just want to say, I just wish me to say something I didn't do. I didn't say you did anything.
I said, by the time this is done, you'll tell me what happened to Chris.
Let's stand here and drink a Hawaii tea before you got here.
Detective Ogden starts talking with Kelly and building a relationship with her.
That relationship building involves several conversations that Jeremy recorded undercover, including at a local restaurant.
You can begin the next chapter of your life. There's only one way for you to do this, though, and that's 100% honest.
I think she wanted to see whether or not I was going to be a worthy adversary. And I think she wanted to play the game.
And I don't want to make a permanent decision on that temporary thought, feeling on the way I feel now, because that's not fair to me or whoever else it would have.
It's almost like the two of them were having a chess game.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to get somebody to tell you a secret that only they know. And I come up with this idea about a fake letter.
Detective Ogden calls Jason's friend, Walt Ammerman, and tells him he wants him to be part of this plan to catch Kelly Cochran.
What he wanted Walt to do was become an actor. They were going to have him call Kelly from a parked car to talk about this letter.
It is March 12th, 2016 at 4:38 p.m. He's going to be calling Kelly Cochran.
He wanted me to call her and tell her that I had a letter that Jason had mailed me.
But it's not true. There is no letter. This is all made up for one purpose, to see what Kelly Cochran's reaction would be.
I got a letter like January 4th or 5th or something like that from him.
You were basically having to convince Kelly that her dead husband was sending a message from beyond the grave.
That he felt or knew that she likely was going to do something to him.
The note says, if something were to happen to me, please send this in a few weeks to the Iron River Police Department. It's like I'm supposed to mail this, but I just wanted to tell you.
Please don't.
Please don't. She says, please don't mail it.
I don't know.
Yeah, do what you gotta do.
And right then I knew, like, he got her.
Yeah, hook, line, and sinker.
And what did that tell you?
Told me I did the right thing.
But that wasn't your only chess move. You had another trick up your sleeve, which was a tree and a carving?
Yeah.
The tree's over there?
Yeah, the tree's right over there. And I had watched her several times there.
He's actually been following Kelly Cochran. She doesn't know this. And Detective Ogden knows that Kelly goes to this one park all the time and is by a certain tree.
She would just come and she would sit on that log. And there was a couple times where I thought she was even crying.
So he decides to make a carving on the tree that will really freak her out when she sees it. And what he carves into the tree is, Chris is here.
I thought maybe she would see it as a sign from the dead, or maybe even something supernatural, and just generate her to talk to me even more.
It's not exactly the way they teach at the police academy.
No. All I saw were her running through the woods, and then all of a sudden the truck backed out and she took off. That's the night that she decides to tell me everything.
You watched him die, right? Where did he shoot him in his body? You don't know? You caught Chris in your arms?
This is huge. For the first time, Kelly is admitting Chris was murdered.
Chris was lying in your house, shot. You told me this. And then he died quickly. Correct?
She says that Jason shot Chris. Her portion is being forced to help clean up.
I'm the victim. My husband was abusive. I had no choice. I couldn't tell anybody or he'd kill me too.
Chris? What? What do you mean by downsize? What did he do with Chris?
Cut him off.
I remember her words being, he downsized him, and it just made my stomach turn.
That was the first time she admitted not only had Chris been murdered, but that he'd been dismembered.
Correct.
And she goes on to give a very specific detail that will come into play later. She claims that Jason forced her to pull the bullet out of Chris's body with a pair of forceps.
Why not arrest her?
You have to understand, I put her in a position to play the victim. She had to do all of these things under duress, and that's how she's going to be able to disclose other information so that we can recover Chris Reagan.
But you know where he put Peter. Yes. You're gonna go with me, okay? We're gonna go.
He says, we're going to Michigan. You're going to show us where the body is.
Detective Ogden and Kelly drive all night. He is counting on her to help him. But will she?
With her, it was like, lie, 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 truth. Lie, truth. Lie, 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 truth.
It's the middle of the night. Kelly Cochran is driving with Detective Jeremy Ogden back to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to show him where she and her husband Jason buried Chris's remains.
Driving up there with her, it was interesting. I mean, she did what most people do after they tell you their deepest, darkest secret. She slept.
They drive all night. They leave at like midnight. They get to Iron River, at like 7 in the morning.
It's just miles and miles of trees and rolling hills. You could literally go to a place here where nobody else had ever been.
Pretty easy to hide a body.
Yeah. It's weird how beautiful it is, and at the same time, eerie.
So as I'm following them, they, go down to this one particular area.
We're just like on a flat, straight spot in the road. And she's like, it's right here.
And there are other police officers there to search the area. But they find nothing. So the question is, did Kelly get the spot wrong, or is Kelly lying? Detective Ogden then asked Kelly to show him around her house where the murder happened.
I wanted her to explain to me what happened to Chris and how he died. And then we'll go upstairs and we're going to work our way down. And for it to all be on film. She started to take me upstairs. This was your room, Kelly?
Yes. She told you basically that they had sex upstairs.
Right, there was some kind of sex involved. You and him ended up here in this room.
And then that night?
On the 14th you did? It's like you can see her mind working. Whatever story she was going to tell me was going to have to match the physical evidence that we may or may not discover.
She takes him back downstairs and says, actually it happened out here in the hallway, in this back hallway.
You were having sex right here. Okay. So she says that once they're done, Chris starts to walk up the stairs into the kitchen, and Jason, unbeknownst to her, shoots him from the basement. You're telling me that Jason shot him from behind? And that Chris falls back on her and that they both tumble down the stairs. Is he still on top of you when you get to the bottom? Are you actually under him? Okay.
With her, it was like, lie, 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 truth. Lie, truth. Lie, 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 truth. You gotta figure it out.
What does Jason say to you?
Nothing. It's something.
As incriminating as all this is, Detective Ogden is sure she isn't telling the whole truth.
You continue that conversation back in Indiana.
Yeah.
Hours and hours of conversation.
Yeah. There's over 100 hours.
What don't you believe?
Again, it's all recorded, undercover.
What don't I believe? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure with you.
His communication with her really picked up speed back in Indiana because he's now determined.
I'll meet her at a park. I've sat down at a restaurant with her.
I only have one goal. It's to bring Chris home.
Detective Ogden believes that the more they talk, the more likely Kelly is to slip up. And if she slips up, she may just lead them to Chris Regan's body.
Okay, honestly, I'm scared we're not, he's not in the ground. Give you my word.
It seemed like Kelly kind of wanted to be playing with Detective Ogden, this sort of cat and mouse game.
You have to understand that there are things that you've said throughout this that would cause concern, okay? And changes and variations of your story.
She continues to maintain throughout all these hundreds of hours that she's the victim.
It's always my husband forced me to do this.
You have said that you're the victim when it comes to Chris, that you were put in this bad position, right?
At one point, you put your foot down and say, stop lying.
No more of this crap lying to me. No more, no, all the I've been back and forth through with you. All
What brought that on?
Frustration, probably.
Ogden thinks Kelly realizes he is losing his patience and might finally just arrest her. It was all about to come to a head. Soon after, Detective Ogden gets a misspelled text from Kelly. Ever been to the West Coast? I was driving last night. Sure enough, she skipped town.
Except she didn't head west after all. The police tracked her as she fled south to Kentucky.
33-year-old Kelly Cochran was arrested in Graves County, Kentucky after a tip to the U.S. Marshals. Cochran was wanted in Michigan.
And so when you interview her in Kentucky, in many ways, it was a breakthrough confession.
Yes.
things are different. Why are they different? Because I'm different.
I interviewed her all day that day, and then I interviewed her for a portion of the day the next day.
Now Kelly drops another bombshell.
Why she didn't be my responsibility, regardless of the outcome.
Her new story, she now claims she knew in advance that Jason was going to kill Chris Regan the night she invited him to their home.
It's just part of the planning of it. You allowed it to occur when you didn't have to allow it to occur.
And she tells Ogden she knew this because they had an agreement.
When does that agreement occur? Right. And your agreement from the time you were married was that you had the affair. It's your responsibility to kill off that person. Okay. Or he would kill you. Vice versa. Right.
If either spouse were to cheat during the course of the marriage, the cheating spouse would have to either kill their lover or be killed by this other spouse.
You heard that right. And yet, that bizarre alleged wedding day pact is just the start of what she reveals.
I'm gonna get emotional. I wait 1 second because it still gets me every time.
Now in jail in Michigan, charged with murder, Kelly Cochran is taken out of her cell to go on what cops are calling a field trip.
This was just, giving consent to what your house would do.
Kelly had agreed that she would take me to Chris's remains where she left them. She wanted to do the right thing.
I could drop the creek. Excuse me if I do. See where it starts that curve to the left? I'd park there.
She takes her a little further east than she took us on the first day.
Thank you. What would the biggest piece of bone be that you... torso, and that was yours? So then we should find ribs, and I think that generally...
The skull should be the biggest, though.
As she's talking, she has no guilt at all. So carefree, like no big deal.
This was not exactly a somber day for her. She had a lot of cigarettes. she asked for a cheese pizza for lunch.
How do you cheese pizza? Just cheese? Maybe a soda. Can you bring pizza?
While the searching continues, Chief Frizzo takes her to the house.
You say that, Jason pulled him into here, and that's where he cut him off?
And she's eating a piece of pizza, of course, when we're doing this.
Then Kelly also is just nonchalantly walking past the kitchen sink and says, "Oh, there's the forceps."
You said something about forceps. Yeah. Is that what you're talking about? There you go.
You're saying you use those?
Yep.
It had been sitting there the whole time. And I said, "Are you saying you use those to try and get the bullet out of Chris's head?" And she said, "Yeah." Just like that.
It was critical evidence matching what Kelly had said in that early interrogation when she first admitted that Chris had been murdered. But back in these woods, an even more important discovery. Chris Regan's skull itself.
I'm gonna get emotional. I wait 1 second because it still gets me every time. I just said to myself, I finally found you. I just literally said that to myself, So
That was a very sobering moment. And the only bright spot on that is they could link Kelly Cochran into his murder, and that got things going so that she would go to trial.
The Kelly Cochran case, it's the biggest case we've had locally, maybe ever.
Kelly's life was riding on the trial.
Despite all that she's admitted in those interrogations, Kelly Cochran pleads not guilty.
I was definitely afraid that she was going to get off.
You never know how a jury's going to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kelly and Jason Cochran were bonded in blood.
The case was prosecuted by Iron County prosecutor Melissa Powell.
We were pretty confident going into trial that we could convict her of being an aider and abetter. Kelly Cochran was a willing participant, and because of that, she's just as guilty as he is.
Michael Schulke was the defense attorney for Kelly Cochran.
One of the evidence that the people have to get to their verdict is the word of Miss Cochran. What's your little word? She's a liar.
We believe that Jason acted alone because he was not into this open marriage and was jealous and angry that Kelly was involved with another man.
Please be seated.
The trial would last almost 3 weeks.
She has already admitted that she knew what was going to happen.
And though there were some 60 witnesses, the case pretty much boiled down to just one: Kelly Cochran herself.
Kelly testified about the abuse that she claims she suffered in her marriage.
There was a lot of times when he would grab me, push me, shove me. He became very jealous, very angry. There was times when he had threatened me in the house, outside of the house, throwing stuff at me.
Kelly Cochran testified for several days. I don't think she helped herself at all.
You never told people that he was abusive until this case came about, did you? Until after. And you never told people that he threatened you until this case came about, right? Until after.
When I saw Kelly in person, I couldn't believe Christopher would have had a sexual relationship with her. She looked like the devil. Her eyes were blank.
I don't know if I would have been capable to shoot him or even do anything about it.
There's nothing that comes out of her mouth that I would ever believe.
I think the jury wanted to hear from her and how she was going to explain away hundreds of hours of previous statements.
Remember, her story changed in all those recorded interrogations, from I know nothing to Jason forced me to help kill Chris.
When does that agreement occur?
To we had a wedding pact and I was part of the murder.
I was fighting that. Because every time I had an interview or an interrogation with him, everything I said was wrong. What do you mean everything you said was wrong? He would question me until I said what was supposed to be said.
What was it like watching Kelly on the stand?
Excruciating.
So it's your testimony today that you had no plans to kill Chris, correct? I've never wanted him dead. And you lied to Detective Ogden when you said there was a plan, correct?
correct? She swears this testimony is no lie.
Today, you're telling the truth to these 12 or 14 strangers. With Kelly admitting so many lies, the defense asked the jury, how can they believe one story versus any other?
Why is she truthful when she says she is acting with Jason versus the times that she said he acted alone? What makes her more truthful then?
I think at that point in time, she's overwhelmed. She's made so many statements. She's told so many lies. It's time to tell the truth. People disclose the truth in bits and pieces when they're ready and when they're caught.
The defendants in this matter were bonded in blood. Chris Reagan was bathed in it. And at this time, I'm asking you to wash away the blood and find the defendant guilty of all counts.
There is reasonable doubt here. People have failed to meet the verdict. And if you believe that, you have to acquit you.
Kelly had made the comment before trial, you don't think I can turn just one juror? I was concerned that there might be one juror that buys her story.
And as those jurors start to deliberate, there is something else. What is it that they haven't heard?
The jury deliberated for about 3 hours, which, considering it was a 2.5 week long trial, wasn't very long at all.
The jury comes back in, and as they're standing in the jury box, I felt confident because, a couple of them did look over and smile, just kind of give a look.
Count number 1, open murder, guilty of first degree premeditated murder, aiding and abetting.
Everybody just cried, and Chris's family was sitting right behind me, and the first thing I did is just turn around and hug them.
Kelly was just straight-faced during the reading of the verdict. I didn't notice any changes in her at all.
Unfortunately, the jury bought the story that the prosecution put forth.
35-year-old Kelly Cochran will never again walk free.
Guilty of 5 total felony counts.
Kelly was convicted on first-degree premeditated murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Michigan and without the possibility of parole.
For me, it's not going to change anything. Chris is gone, and what she did is just horrible. I hope she rots in hell.
Kelly Cochran is convicted and sentenced, but there's much more to her case than what was presented in court. Dark and twisted allegations that the jurors never heard.
These are some really disturbing allegations that were brought forth by the neighbors of the Cochrans, who said they heard these weird construction noises coming from Kelly and Jason's house late at night.
And the reciprocating saw. The one with the roll-on blade goes back and forth. It cut through wood and nails and everything at the same time with it.
Kelly and Jason asked me if I want to come over for dinner one night. I was like, yeah, sure. And this was like 2 days after Chris was missing.
It's like mind-boggling how much meat they had. So we were always wondering about that. What if they were that kind of people and actually did kill a guy and then butchered him up and had us over for dinner? I think he hacked them up and proved it to us. Don't even say that.
I'm like, oh God. Like, no. When I realized that I might have ate the dude, I didn't want to believe it. It changed me. It changed me 100%.
It was a theory that they came to a conclusion on their own. That wasn't something that we ever even brought into the case investigation. It's not that I didn't think it could happen, but it wasn't significant at the time.
But one thing investigators took very seriously was the allegation that there could be other murder victims out there. Kelly's own brother told Detective Ogden that Kelly said herself that there were more victims.
And the more is coming from her. She's telling you guys the correct one. And how many more bodies did she tell you? Supposedly there's 9 total.
Police were recording all of Kelly Cochran's phone conversations while she was behind bars, and you can hear her own mother asking her, is it true? Are there other murder victims?
Hi, Kev. What's going on, Kelly? What the hell is wrong? I mean, where did all this come from?
You didn't see this coming?
I see this coming after it all happened, but I didn't know that you guys killed people before all this. Do you have a conscience? Is this like, I mean, have you always felt this way?
I've always been like this, huh?
Kelly actually told me that she was born the way she is. She's never had emotions. She's never had sympathy.
There is no evidence that has been brought forth that would indicate that any stories that were told by Kelly of being involved in murders of other people are true. There are no bodies coming out of the woodwork that are tied to Kelly Cochran.
But what does Kelly Cochran herself now say about the allegations that she's a serial killer?
You had told police that you had killed others in the past. Is there truth to that?
And in a case where they uncovered so much darkness and evil, there would be a surprising light at the end of the tunnel for the two lead investigators.
Following the guilty verdict, Kelly is sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Chris Reagan.
11 months later, Kelly pleads guilty to murdering her husband, Jason Cochran, in Indiana, and is sentenced to an additional 65 years in prison.
I believe that the idea behind this evil in her, I mean, it's the purest form of evil that you're gonna get.
I spoke to Kelly Cochran from her prison in Michigan, where she's serving out her life sentence.
You told police that you had killed others in the past. Is there truth to that?
No, I've never killed anybody.
Then why would you tell investigators you had? And lead them on wild goose chases?
I don't know.
They said they spoke to neighbors who lived down the street from you who were convinced that they had a barbecue that consisted of human remains.
I heard about that. Here's the thing. I never had a barbecue with anybody. Nobody was ever cooked. Nobody was barbecued.
I've spoken to investigators, Kelly, who said that when they talked to you and heard your story, that it made them believe in pure evil. What would you say to that?
I believe it. Because I'm not a bad person. I was raised by good people. I've never harmed anybody.
And so, in your view, what did happen that night when Chris died?
My husband disabled the man and cut him up in front of me.
And you just stood there doing nothing?
What are you talking about?
You didn't call the police, you didn't...
I was tied up.
This is the first I'm hearing of her ever saying she'd been tied up. This is a game, and she's going to continue this game as long as she can. And she's not done with it yet. There probably is not a punishment on this earth that can match what she did to Christopher. I could feel Christopher with me when I'm around Apple Blossom Trail. Feel a warmth, joy, happiness. It is a good place for us.
For Laura Frizzo, the case had a bittersweet outcome. Although she was able to help bring justice for Chris Reagan's murder, she was fired from her job as police chief after Kelly's arrest.
I started to have some issues with my boss at work, and those issues kind of got heated.
But while Laura may have lost her job, she found romance in an unlikely place.
I felt immediately connected to him just because of the person he was.
And so you kind of made the first move. What happened?
One day I texted him and I said, "Do you want to kiss me?" I was like, why did I send that? Because there was like dead air, just no response for a long time.
You know, the answer was yes right out of the gate as soon as I read it.
So you asked for the first kiss. Who asked for whose hand in marriage?
I did.
How'd that go, big guy?
It went well. She accepted right away.
What's the future for both of you?
We own a piece of land that Laura picked in the UP right on the lake. And one day I'm going to build her a dream house there.
And of course, we wish them the best as they now plan their next chapter together, away from their work. That is our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm David Muir, and from all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
How's the beach, Kristen? Probably about 67 out. The sun's going down, and I should have been here earlier.
She went to the party by herself. A young man came out and was like, oh, I know where she lives. I can help walk her home. That was the last time Kristen was seen by anybody.
But still no sign of 19-year-old Kristen Smart.
The media really picked up on this. This was a situation that was unlike anything that had happened.
And the dog starts sniffing the doors down the hallway.
The dogs lit up and went crazy.
House was searched. There were some really disturbing videos that were found there. It's a bad piece of evidence because it shows a pattern, right?
It doesn't show a pattern of killing anybody.
Well, not that long after Kristen Smart disappeared, 2 more local college students from San Luis Obispo went missing.
The case has stirred dread in the Central Coast community that a serial killer was on the loose.
It goes from a town in which nothing ever happens to a town in which 3 young women seem to be abducted and disappeared and perhaps murdered.
In the door, I think one of the guys said like, hey, what do you want? I said, I'll take a beer. It's off-campus party. It's a grimy rental house filled with boys. It was just the most run-of-the-mill, lame, everyone's out of town for Memorial Day weekend party. Never in my life would I thought that I would be thinking about this party 27 years later. And never in my life would I think that something such a notorious part of Cal Poly's history now would have occurred at that house that night. I mean, never in my life.
San Luis Obispo is considered by a lot of people to be about the perfect place to be.
It's a beautiful town. It's pretty small. It's right between the mountains and the beach.
It's a typical college town, so a lot of off-campus parties, a lot of activity in the downtown area in the evening with restaurants and bars.
Cal Poly is truly part of the fabric of San Luis Obispo. And the university itself has a sterling reputation.
But in the summer of 1996, this peaceful, beautiful college town became known for something else: the disappearance of 19-year-old Cal Poly freshman Kristen Smart.
Kristen was from Stockton, so from out of the area, and just trying to find her way in the world. Kind of experimenting with meeting new people, new experiences, and going to parties.
In 1998, 2020 sat down with Kristen's parents, Denise and Stan Smart.
Kristen is our oldest of 3 children that we have, and she was very conscientious as far as school goes. She had good grades. She liked to play soccer. She was a very loving person.
How's the beach, Kristen? Probably about 67 out. The sun's going down, and I should have been here earlier.
She was adventurous, and she kept us all hopping all the time. And she was the first one to throw her arms around you.
Kristen had a great relationship with her family. She would call them every Sunday.
They're, I think, a very loving family, very dedicated family, very connected to Kristen. They vacationed together and had continual contact ever since Kristen came to Cal Poly.
She was my next door neighbor, and she would spend a lot of time in my room. She wanted to work for MTV. She wanted to be like unique. She didn't just follow the crowd.
Kristen was with her friend Margarita Campos,
and they had gone to a very small, quiet party. There was only one beer was drank by the two girls, and so she was not intoxicated. And then about 10 o'clock, Margarita wanted to go back to the dorms, and Kristen did not.
It was a Friday night, it was a holiday weekend, and she was having a good time.
So she was just looking at me like, Margarita, come on, I know you want to come. You said you were going to come with me, fine, just leave me here. And so she went to the party by herself, and that was the last time I saw her.
It was a privately owned house. It was rented by Cal Poly students, very close to campus, and it was a birthday party for one of the residents.
And the people at the party are saying are not going crazy. This is not like Animal House toga party.
No, this is kind of a quiet, kind of what I would call a sad, kind of lame party.
How old were you then?
I was 20 years old. I was a sophomore. Midterms were coming up, so I knew that Friday night that I wasn't going to stay out terribly late. And then, appearing as if out of the mist is this 6'1", gorgeous, like Matt, gorgeous model girl who shows up, and she's wearing these really shiny black, vinyl board shorts. She walks up to me and she says, "Hi, I'm Roxy."
So Roxy was a name that Kristen would sometimes give other people when she was out. Sometimes you do it just for fun and giggles. Sometimes you do it as a safety concern.
And she was wearing a T-top. She was wearing red Puma tennis shoes.
And I go, "Oh, hey, I'm Trevor." And she leans in and she kisses me, French kisses me. I've never met this girl in my life. And she grabs my hand and pulls me into the bathroom.
I mean, is this the kind of thing that happens often?
Not to me.
Was she obviously drunk?
I don't remember smelling alcohol on her breath.
When someone kisses you and they've been drinking heavily, you taste it.
Oh yeah, of course they do. Oh yeah, for sure. She pulls me to the bathroom, dark bathroom, and she shuts the door so it's for a second it's all black, and I'm like, what? And then she turns on the lights, and she immediately goes to the mirror and she starts doing her makeup. We're just standing there. And I'm like, and she's like, "Do you think I'm ugly?" What? And she goes, "Do you think I'm ugly? Really, do you think I'm ugly?" And I'm like, "No, you're gorgeous." It was there was two different personas going on at that time. She says, "Okay, I have to use the bathroom." And then it's "Oh, right." With you. I'm like, "What am I doing?" The second I walk out of the bathroom, this guy just pops up right in front of me as if he's waiting in line for the bathroom. He looks at me, and I just remember he had blonde hair, big blue eyes, a really intense stare, and he says with this authority in his voice, he goes, "What I'd like to know is what you did with her in the bathroom." And he said it in a way where I was like, "Oh no, this is her boyfriend." I was like, "Well, what have I got myself into?" I'm like, "Nothing, man." And he laughed. He had this big goofy laugh that was almost like a sigh of relief. And I was like, "Oh, you're just some kid."
So he sort of broke off that intense stare and went into this.
He laughed, and I was like, "Oh, whatever, you weirdo."
So at about 2 o'clock, the party was ending and students were leaving. And several of them saw Kristen laying face down to the left of the driveway of the party house, pretty much passed out.
By the end of the night, Kristen was incapacitated completely, and that's when a young man came out and was like, "Oh, I know where she lives. I can help walk her home." So he walked her and the other girl, whose name is Cheryl, home.
At some point during the walk home, he hugs Kristen. She's saying she's cold.
Kristen and the two students walking with her all live in different dorms, and as the three get closer to campus, the young man assures Cheryl he'll get Kristen home safely.
And then Cheryl went off to the right, southbound towards her dorm.
And that was the last time Kristen was seen.
The entire campus is on edge over her disappearance. Everywhere students turn, there are reminders, from the college newspaper to flyers that are being posted throughout Cal Poly.
It's like everyone knows what's happening, so you
kind of get a little more nervous and stuff.
It was shocking, and the community was stunned.
There was a phone call about 2 o'clock in the morning. My roommate grabbed the phone, and when she picked it up, she said she heard a voice. Someone trying to talk. What if Kristen was trying to get through to me?
It's Saturday, the morning after the party, and Kristen Smart has not made it back to her dorm room.
Her red backpack was untouched on her bed. She didn't have her wallet, her keys, her ID, which was really peculiar. And her roommate thought it was weird.
I don't think that there was one single time while she was my roommate that she didn't come home, unless she was going away for the weekend. When her roommate said, Margarita, have you seen Kristen anywhere? Her stuff's thrown all over her bed, and it hasn't moved a single inch since I was last year. That's what got us kind of thinking, this is strange.
As other girls were waking up, they were like, "Where's Kristen?" Margarita Campos went to her room. They were supposed to meet that morning, and Kristen wasn't there.
We just all kind of sat around like almost like a vigil, like, when is she gonna come around?
Authorities were contacted on Saturday. The roommate and a couple other friends went to the supervising dorm guy. He took a small report, called his supervisor, Cal Poly police officer Payne, and did nothing, saying that, she hasn't been gone long enough.
Cal Poly PD, they did not make an initial report. They said that Kristen might be out of town because it was Memorial Day weekend.
And then, the days went by, nothing was touched, and we're like, this is getting weird. It was getting kind of like, maybe there's something wrong.
Pretty much everyone who is close to Kristen is feeling uneasy, and by Monday, which is Memorial Day, that turns into real fear.
The whole hallway that I lived in, everyone was on edge. Everyone was worried, like just constant concern.
The morning of May 27th, they decided to call Cal Poly Police Department to report Kristen as a missing person.
And at that point, sometime in the evening, Denise Smart receives a phone call from Cal Poly asking if Kristen is home.
And, I said no. They said, well, whose house would she go to? And I said, well, there's no place I know of that she would have gone to. I just didn't know of any plans, particularly since she told me she was going to call me Sunday.
Well, initially, the Cal Poly police basically said that it was very likely she had just gone out of town, gone camping, gone with friends, and was going to be able to turn up later.
I went to bed that night and I just prayed, be camping, because I kept calling her dorm until, after midnight.
She didn't come home. This is Tuesday, and she still wasn't home.
I tried calling the dorms. Her roommate assured me nothing had been touched, nothing left. And she said Kristen would not leave without her makeup. And she just kept saying it over and over. She would not leave without her makeup.
So we called the city police and explained to them what had happened, and they told us that it's not their jurisdiction, and they told us to call Cal Poly. So we called the Cal Poly police and gave them the information.
It wasn't until Kristen didn't show up to class and the girls made a second report that Cal Poly actually filed a missing persons report and began their investigation.
It seemed like there wasn't a lot of red flags that were being raised within the Cal Poly Police Department for whatever reason.
I was petrified. I couldn't sleep at night. I think I was a wreck. I was scared about her feelings towards me, I think, because I did leave her at the party, and I just kept on thinking, what if I went with her, or what if I made her come home with us?
She literally had vanished or disappeared back on the 25th, the 3-day weekend, Memorial Day weekend. She had disappeared.
On Tuesday, they started their investigation by interviewing a couple people at the party. They spoke to Kristen's friends, but not a lot was done.
Every single day I spoke with someone at the campus police station every single day. They said, Denise, I'm telling you, this happens all the time. You cannot believe how many times kids just leave. When they have a hard time in school, they just leave. And I'd say, but she didn't take anything with her. It's, not like her to do that. And they'd say, you just would be surprised what these kids do.
I think the evolution of the investigation began very slowly. And then when it became abundantly clear that Kristen, did not just stay overnight, it began to pick up slightly.
Frustration turns to criticism as Cal Poly police investigate what could have happened to missing student Kristen Smart.
I don't know that the University Police was equipped to deal with this early on. I think they certainly had personnel, but not a robust investigation unit and really the tools that they really needed.
Denise Smart, Kristen's mother, had a really difficult time getting people to pay attention.
I think it's just your intuition as a mother that you know something is wrong.
The missing persons report was filed on May 28th. It was more than 2 days after Kristen went missing.
There are 10 square miles of property at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Today, every field, every patch of brush, and every rolling hill was scoured by law enforcement officers. After today's ground search, police are growing more certain that Kristen will not be found on campus.
There were searches all over the Cal Poly campus and throughout the South County area. And I knew that the community of San Luis Obispo County, a lot of people really stepped up and tried to make a difference and tried to do whatever they could to help find Kristen and help the parents and the family.
But still no sign of 19-year-old Kristen Smart.
This was like the third week of looking for my daughter around in all the ravines and climbing through culverts and going out with people and looking for her. And she wasn't to be found. And campus police, they were saying, we've run out of leads. I said, no, you had to go to the last people that saw her alive.
Wondering, are you familiar with the term polygraph? Lie detector?
Cal Poly freshman 19-year-old Kristen Smart has vanished without a trace. And as the weeks tick by, theories of her whereabouts are swirling.
On the news, they said that some anonymous person called in and said they saw her hitchhiking.
Someone said she'd been seen at a Taco Bell.
There was a phone call about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was so afraid to answer the phone because I was either afraid that someone was going to say, we have Kristen, don't tell anyone. My roommate grabbed the phone, and when she picked it up, she said she heard a voice, someone trying to talk, but she couldn't really point it out, and they hung up. What if Kristen was trying to get through to me? Or what if someone was trying to call?
Stan and Denise Smart are still trying to believe she's just missing, that she's not, as one rumor has it, dead and buried at the campus construction site.
An Australian reported at that same time of night seeing an altercation between 2 people in front of a dorm that happened to be right across the street from these huge 20-foot trenches.
None of the tips are going anywhere. And of course, like every investigation, the first people you look at are the people closest to the victim, as hard as that is for the family to take.
When the detective came to talk to me, we talked about who Kristen was and the type of person she was. So I was dumbfounded when an hour after they left here, my husband called me and said, well, you're no longer under suspicion. I couldn't even grasp what he was talking about because I was the one who was calling every radio station up and down the coast of California. I was the one who campus told me that she was seen at a Taco Bell. We got the addresses for every Taco Bell in the state of California. We sent flyers to all of them. So I could have laid down here and cried and died, but I needed to find her.
Campus police, they're talking to everybody at that party and everyone who knew her in the dorm. By now, university police have confirmed who was walking Kristen home that night, a student named Cheryl and Cal Poly freshman Paul Flores.
It's not a criminal matter. Basically, what we're doing is we're dealing with still the missing person because you're the last person. We appreciate you coming in.
When you were leaving the party and everybody was kind of leaving, how did you end up getting together with Kristen?
I don't even know.
probably twice, you know. I went like that, just gave her kind of like a hug because she was freezing.
So Paul told the police that Kristen could walk relatively fine and that he wasn't holding her up. He had her arm around her because she was cold. Paul told police that Kristen walked herself into her dorm and then into her room, and that he did not walk with her to her room.
What did she say? Do you remember any of the conversations you had walking up the hill?
No, she just said she was, the only thing I remember is she was saying she was freezing.
So it's very important that you realize, you know, how important this investigation is.
Yeah.
You're grasping this. That this is very serious business with a missing woman and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You're aware of all this.
I'm aware of this.
The interviewer noted that Paul had what appeared to be a black eye or a small bruise beneath his eye and also had some abrasions on his knees. They asked where he got these injuries, and Paul indicated that they came from a pickup basketball game.
Actually, I just have a couple things. Do you play basketball a lot, or you think I know you got a couple? Yeah. Scabs on the knees. I was playing Monday. Monday? Yes. By any chance, did you have any accident or anything? Those look kind of fresh. Yeah. The gravel mold is there.
Take your head off for a second. What happened to your eye?
I got elbow playing basketball.
Everyone they talk to seems to be cooperative and willing to help with this investigation.
It may come down to this, but I'm wondering, are you familiar with the term polygraph? Lie detector? That sort of thing?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Would you be willing to take one if necessary?
Yes.
The Smarts are the most dedicated parents I think you'll ever meet.
I can't give you an itemized list.
And he climbed mountains searching for her.
During the searches around the Cal Poly campus and elsewhere, the media was there documenting this because this was unlike anything that had happened.
The entire campus is on edge over her disappearance.
So the media definitely was interested in this case from the start and covered it extensively.
The Cal Poly police and Kristen's family are working toward a common goal. They're searching for answers.
Initial jurisdiction was with the campus police. They hung on to that tenaciously. They don't have the familiarity with looking into possible homicides.
I don't think one could even expect the University Police Department to deal with a homicide. A homicide requires a lot of skilled personnel, expertise, a forensic lab.
What were some of the outstanding mistakes that you think the campus police made in the early stages of this investigation?
They had done a little cursory look around the dormitories.
So when the detective from the police department came to my home and sat at my table and said, well, I looked in Paul Flores' room, I looked in his laundry and I looked under the bed, and there's no evidence that Kristen was there. Well, I'm not a private investigator and I've not been trained in anything, but I can tell you flat out that your eyes are not the ticket to solving a crime. And whether it's fingerprinting the room or whether it's looking for hair samples or fiber samples, that there are methods to look for that. And you can't expect a university to have that. And so the evidence that is lost is irretrievable.
There are not a lot of wet behind the ear rookies. These are experienced officers here. Take care.
We reached out to Cal Poly, and the current administration says it wasn't around at the time of the disappearance, so it can't provide any insight into the initial investigation by campus police.
A letter written to the university on behalf of the Smart family suggests the campus police department bungled the case from the beginning.
It took about 30 days. I believe the family's pressure, the acknowledgement of not kicking off the investigation quickly, that they reached out to the sheriff's office and requested that the sheriffs step in and take over the investigation.
The sheriffs, now in charge, have to confront the suspicion that the Smarts dread. It's time to search the dorms again, this time with cadaver dogs. weekend is the start of the summer. People are drifting off to vacations. And for days, some believe that Kristen's just gone away with friends, that she'll come back. But when somebody goes missing, those first few days are crucial, and those days are lost.
I think they should have looked into this more closely before school was out.
At this point, we're re-interviewing and making initial interviews of everyone we can identify that was at the party, just to see if anyone else may have seen something that we're missing.
I'm getting more and more anxious as time goes on that, something bad has happened to her.
Kristen Smart's father, family, friends, and law enforcement have been searching for Kristen for about a month.
I can remember the investigator for the campus police indicating to me that they had no new leads.
The investigation seems stalled, and the Smarts asked campus police to go back and talk to the two people who walked Kristen home that night. And Stan says the police reassured him.
They said, oh, these kids are nice, and both of them offered to take a polygraph test. And I said, well, then you need to do it.
So, that night, Cheryl and Paul Flores were walking Kristen home. Cheryl peeled off, and Cheryl says that when she left, Kristen was still out of it. Paul was supporting Kristen, and they were headed for the dorms.
University police are satisfied with Cheryl's version of events, which leaves Paul.
Paul was the last one known to be seen with Kristen on that night.
When University police talked to Paul, they asked him about Roxy, the name she was using at that party.
When you saw Roxy walking, where was the last place that you saw her?
The last time I saw her was about, it's like right there, right by,
Sequoia.
That one that's on the corner right there? Yeah, that one. I saw her like right by there.
Okay, and where was she going? Was she walking? Was she standing still? Was she laying down?
She was walking.
Was she saying anything when she walked away?
No. It's like we didn't even have any, I don't even remember any conversation really during this whole entire time. I don't remember saying goodnight either.
Okay.
Did you? I don't remember I probably did though, say, see you later or whatever.
And when they speak to Paul Flores again a few weeks later, it's on video.
What's your best guess as to what happened? My best guess is maybe, because her dorm is by the parking lot over there, so then I would figure my best guess is she went off with someone. If she's not, what do you think? I would say like someone who she hitchhiked with or something, abducted her or something, Why would she be hitchhiking? Well, won't say, people said they saw her hitchhiking.
Investigators decide to search the dorms again. Problem is, it's been 5 weeks since Kristen vanished. The school year is over. The rooms are already empty.
It was really a perfect storm. The dorm had to be cleaned. And because it hadn't been identified as a possible crime scene, that was allowed to happen.
But there's a kind of evidence that even an empty room can't hide, and that's a scent. So more than a month after Kristen disappeared, they began searching the empty dorm rooms with cadaver dogs.
Peter. Hi, Matt.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And this is Riley, my cadaver dog.
Hi, Riley. How much more keen is a dog's ability to smell a specific scent than a human's?
Their ability to scent is much greater than humans. You'll hear something like 10,000 times greater than humans, but it's something that really isn't totally quantified. They have a very accurate nose for what they've been trained to detect. Riley is specifically trained to detect human remains. It's a number of volatile compounds that make up that human decomp, but to him, those scents mean one thing, the anticipation that he's going to be rewarded with his toy.
These dogs are trained to zero in on that scent and follow it just about anywhere. So how are we going to make this challenging for him?
By setting it in a challenging way, either buried or up high. Ready? Search.
To go back to Kristen Smart, how old can those scents of human decomposition be?
They can be anywhere from time of death to years down the line.
And how much of the human remains do they need in order to actually alert that they found something?
You can get down to very minute amounts, blood splatter, small drops.
Oh, wow. He just did an absolute laser right to the set.
Yes! Good job. He really wants that toy at that point.
You're like a matador with a bull.
Yes, and that's him working for his source that we put out, and that's what he does.
4 different cadaver dogs search Paul Flores' dorm.
The first handler was not given any information about who lived in that dorm. She releases her dog, and the dog starts sniffing the doors down the hallway, hits his brakes, comes back, and alerts on the door to Paul's room, room number 128 at Santa Lucia.
The dogs lit up, went crazy.
2 beds in there, Paul's and a roommate's, and the dogs went directly to Paul's and to a trash can on his side of the room.
The dog alerted to the corner of the mattress, and it was a very intense alert.
3 other dogs blindly alerted on that same area.
Even though the dorm was cleaned out, the scent still was there of someone having died on the bed. And that was a real depressing thing to hear.
Paul Flores is the last person to see Kristen, has the scent of death in his room. Now he's at the center of the investigation. And in his interview, he makes an interesting admission. He admits it. He lied.
Oh, it's not really lies, fit. It's so minute. It's not. Well, I guess you can call it a little white lie.
The sheriff-mounted posse and the county search and rescue team gave it their best shot today, but still no sign of 19-year-old Kristen Smart.
The sheriff's department is circling in on freshman Paul Flores. University police already spoke with him in the dorm room, in a car, and remember, back in their very first audio tape interview with him, days after Kristen disappeared, they saw those scrapes and another injury.
In the early interviews, he had a black eye that was pretty obvious. It hadn't been there on the night of the party.
Take your head off for a second. What happened to your eye?
And then I was playing basketball.
Oh, you did? Okay. Who were you playing basketball with?
I was playing with my friend Jeremy and 2 other guys.
So about the close to the 4th week, then they actually went and they had gone and met with him, I believe, in the Arroyo Grande Police Department.
But by the time he's brought back into the interview room, Paul's story has been checked out, and they confront him about it.
They talked to his basketball buddies. No, he didn't get a black eye playing basketball.
Last time we talked, he had a black eye. Yeah. Yeah. And what did you tell us? I told you I got it playing basketball. That's right. Where did you get it? In my car.
He told a friend that he got it from being pushed at a party. He told another friend he didn't know how he got it. And then the story he ended up sticking to was that he got it by changing a radio in his truck.
He said, well, actually, I was working on my pickup truck, and I bumped my head against the steering wheel. But I was too embarrassed because that was such a dumb thing to do that I didn't. I made up the basketball story.
I hit the steering wheel. That's about it. But like, how often do people hit their eye in the steering wheel? So, I don't know.
The investigator that I talked to who did the video, what struck him wasn't so much the inconsistencies and the wobbly story. What struck him was the body language.
Your best guess as to what happened.
Very, very fidgety, very, very reticent to answer questions, and he just looks super nervous, scared, and wants to be anywhere in the world other than that room. Now, of course, anyone's going to be kind of nervous, maybe, speaking to police. I guess anybody would be if they're speaking to you about the disappearance of somebody.
Put his hands inside his shirt. He was squirming. He was crying.
The story changes multiple times. He admits that he's changed the story.
Oh, it's not really lies, but fit. It's so minute. It's not. Well, I guess you can call it a little white lie, but you got your black eyes or white lie? Yep.
He said in previous interviews that he'd be happy to help, even take a polygraph test.
Well, is there anything else that you've told us that you didn't think was a big deal? No. That you haven't told us the truth? No. How do we know that? told you I had to talk to my parents and stuff.
Well, if you're telling us the truth, why do you have to talk to your parents and think about it?
Because I do.
And at that time, then he refused a polygraph and he walked out. He wanted an attorney. And that was the last time that anyone's been able to speak with him.
If I was Paul, wouldn't you want to help as much as you could to just answer questions? And why would you be afraid? I'm trying to be cooperative, and why can't he?
I can't say anything I don't remember.
Paul Flores was also a 19-year-old freshman here at Cal Poly. He grew up in the community.
In high school, Paul Flores was known as more of a creepy guy. People didn't really vibe with him that much.
Paul would give us girls, a weird vibe when we would hang out.
Paul Flores and I graduated from the exact same high school, Arroyo Grande High School. A lot of people that I'm close with today knew him, in fact. And what I've heard is a common theme. We've heard a lot of people describe him. Someone that was awkward is the key word that comes to mind.
And I felt bad for him because it isolated him. So he always felt like alone or different. And people made sure he knew that.
Paul was admitted to Cal Poly from a high school in Arroyo Grande. He was a terrible student. I think his GPA was 0.6. He had one successful class, and that was bowling for a freshman. He got in trouble loitering on the balconies of women to the point where police were called.
He drank pretty heavily for a freshman. Girls would tell their friends to stay away from him.
The women had a nickname for him, Chester the Molester.
Paul Flores of Arroyo Grande is the last known person to see Kristen Smart alive. The sheriff's department is now looking at him as a potential suspect.
People do not vanish off the face of the earth without a trace. And as we've been told 99% of the time, the person responsible is the last person seen with them.
There they are, standoff. Paul won't talk to police. And believe me, it is very frustrating to have a suspect and not find any physical evidence.
And for everyone else, the world just keeps on turning. And you have to roll forward 2 years after Kristen disappears for anything to change.
2 more local college students from San Luis Obispo went missing, one from Cal Poly, one from Cuesta College.
Vanished without a trace. 3 young women missing over the last third college co-ed in San Luis Obispo.
It's a mystery that's terrorized the community.
Cases stirred dread that a serial killer was on the loose.
When those 2 young women went missing, it really terrified the community. There could possibly be a serial killer on the loose in San Luis Obispo County. People were terrified. Was it going to happen again?
A young man came out and was like, oh, I know where she lives. I can help walk her home. And that was the last time Kristen was seen by anybody.
And if they're ever going to find Kristen Smart's body, if there's a body, maybe alive, who knows, they need to widen their scope of inquiry.
You honestly think that Kristen Smart is still alive and out there somewhere?
The reality is, Kristen is not found. There still is only one suspect.
Would you state your full name for the record, please?
Paul Ruben Flores.
We're here to answer the questions. Ask the questions or we'll leave.
This guy murdered Kristen Smart and he's in your Walmart, okay?
They have the wrong guy.
So out of the blue, a guy you don't know says, I killed her and buried her in my yard. You didn't want to call the sheriff or FBI?
No, because I wasn't going to be Kristen. If something happened, I'm dead.
You walk outside at nighttime, it's cold, the moon's out, and you know there's a girl buried somewhere.
So a person can disappear, but the remains don't.
My mom was recording my brother's graduation party. Paul Flores and his friends were there.
Paul, are they going to call your name at Cal Poly in 4 years?
No way.
Kristen was missing. Paul was last person to see her.
Hey, Paul, do you have any information on that missing girl? What'd you do with her?
He turned like beet red and ghost white. I remember that. It felt really odd.
From ABC News.
Tonight, the case of the missing co-ed.
2020's Tom Jarrell interviewed Stan and Denise Smart in 1998.
Do you believe Paul Flores knows what happened to your daughter and perhaps killed her?
I think she's deceased, and I think she died at the hands of Paul Flores. That's
of an accident?
I want it to be something accidental. I don't want to think that anyone intentionally harmed my child. To have to think of the trauma they may have had to endure before dying is really more than I can deal with.
Denise Smart tries a personal appeal to Paul Flores, approaching him at the gas station where he works.
He was pumping gas, and he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yes, I'm Kristen's mother," and I took his hand, and I shook it, and I held it with both of my hands, and I said, "I need your help." He just started stuttering and stammering, and he quickly went inside the gas station, and he hid in a closet.
With evidentiary dead ends everywhere, the investigation stalls out. The sheriff even tells the local paper, "We need Paul Flores to tell us what happened to Kristen Smart. Absent something from Mr. Flores, I don't see us completing this case."
I think that tells Paul Flores and his attorneys that, they're home free. It's over with.
For them to tell us there's nothing else they can do is just like the worst possible thing you could hear.
Hi, how are you?
How's it going?
In order to get some accountability, Kristen Smart's family refuses to leave Paul Flores alone.
How's it going? Need some ribbons?
Yeah.
Once they have learned that he's employed by someone, then people have called and complained to the management that, they don't feel it's safe or appropriate.
Flores is soon out of a job at a Blockbuster Video and is fired at least twice more.
Everywhere he goes, he's followed, and the family makes his life miserable.
Paul Flores was fleeing into the Navy.
We had a legislator who phoned the Navy and just made him aware of his past history.
I can imagine how the Navy felt about that, and they decided not to accept it.
Now, Flores' attorney calls it harassment. What do you call it?
Paul Flores has the option right now, today, of stopping anything that he deems may be harassment.
How?
If he would come forward and talk with the sheriff's department and tell us what happened that night.
The Smarts work with private investigator Tim Hames to shadow Paul Flores.
I'm hoping he'll see that, we're still on him. We're not going away.
He volunteers his time and spends hours staking out Paul's every move. Hames tries to confront Flores, hoping to push him to confess.
He said, "I can't talk to you. I can't tell you anything."
They also filed a civil suit to get more information. They were able to get depositions from the Flores family to try to get information about their daughter.
The lawyers ask his father, "Did you ever talk about what happened?" His answer's not as bizarre as his reaction to the question.
Has your son ever told you that he did not kill Kristen Smart?
Well, I never asked that question. Well, he just, do you know anything about it? He says no.
During their depositions, Ruben and Susan Flores refused to acknowledge that Kristen Smart is probably dead.
He's been accused of murdering this girl. Is in your testimony that he's never talked to you about those things?
Is this girl murdered?
We've never discussed it as a death. Disappearance.
One thing about a civil suit, it means that Paul Flores, who has stopped talking to law enforcement, is compelled by law to answer questions.
Would you state your full name for the record, please?
Paul Ruben Flores.
Then you can see Paul's lawyer points to a piece of paper on the table with the only answer they will hear for the rest of the deposition.
What is your present address?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution.
He plans to answer that he will invoke the Fifth Amendment on all your questions. We're here to answer the questions. We're required to do so. Ask the questions or we'll leave.
Where did you attend high school? What is the name of your father? How old are you?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment.
After Flores pleads the Fifth 27 times, Murphy gets up.
I think that concludes the deposition.
A county court spokesperson told us the civil lawsuit has long since been closed.
Not that long after Kristen Smart disappeared, 2 more local college students from San Luis Obispo went missing.
20-year-old Rachel Newhouse disappeared after she left a fraternity party at Tortilla Flats. Then, last month, 20-year-old Andrea Crawford disappeared from her San Luis Obispo duplex.
That kind of stuff just doesn't happen here.
I work at night, and so now I make sure that I have someone come and pick me up and walk me back.
The case has stirred dread in the Central Coast community that a serial killer was on the loose.
There was a suspect that was identified, Rex Allen Krebs.
We believe Rex Krebs is responsible for the deaths of both Rachel Newhouse and Andrea Crawford.
Krebs is convicted of those murders, but investigators quickly realized that there is no way he could have killed Kristen too, because he was in prison for other crimes when she disappeared.
They refocus on Paul Flores. The new plan, undercover FBI stings. But can they get their only suspect to open up and confess?
As the years go on, it could be easy to forget a case like this. But billboards go up in town to remind everyone, don't forget about Kristen Smart. She's still missing.
Those billboards really became just important into keeping this case in the limelight.
A lady came by my office and said, that sign is irritating. It's kind of a downer to see a sign about a dead girl every day when I drive through the village. When are you going to take it down? And I said, ma'am, I'll take it down when we find Kristen Smart.
At this point, it appears, at least to the public, that the investigation has gone cold. But the police and the FBI insist it continues to be active.
Agents repeatedly go undercover, hoping to create a situation where Flores will slip up.
To try and get Paul to speak, to say something different than what he says for years. FBI takes him out fishing. Catalina Island with his mom and dad. Wine and dine him. Get him drunk. Same story. Take him to strip clubs in Las Vegas. He always said the same thing. They have the wrong guy. And if they're ever going to find Kristen Smart's body, if there's a body, maybe alive, who knows, I'm hoping she is, they need to widen their scope of inquiry.
Do you honestly think that Kristen Smart is still alive and out there somewhere?
I honestly think there's a chance she could be. Because we don't have her body.
Almost from the beginning, Kristen Smart's parents are repeatedly frustrated by the official investigation.
One example. Soon after Kristen went missing, a tenant rents out a house owned by Paul's parents. The tenant is washing her car and finds an earring, a woman's earring, in her driveway. It's a tiny piece of potentially huge evidence.
And it was believed that that earring might have belonged to Kristen.
It apparently was collected by sheriff's personnel and stored somewhere, but not correctly logged and tied to this case.
No one really knows what happened to it, and so there wasn't any evidence that was able to be processed off it if they wanted to run DNA or anything, because the earring is gone.
Whose it was, whether or not it had anything to do with this case, we'll never know.
In 2005, Trevor Belter says the sheriff's office reaches out to re-interview him. Remember, he met Kristen at that party on her final night.
So I met with them for 2.5 hours. Wow. And I remember telling my wife at the time, she was like, what happened? I'm like, they don't have a clue. They have no clue what happened.
The sheriffs contact you. and ask you for theories about what might have happened to Kristen Smart.
They're like, what did you hear? What are the rumors?
They chase every theory, including allegations of a potential connection to one of America's most infamous murderers.
Suspicion hangs over Scott Peterson tonight in the Christmas Eve disappearance of his wife Lacey, 8 months pregnant.
When that case unfolded with Scott Peterson, there was great interest in San Luis Obispo County as well.
Kristen Smart disappeared in '96 when Scott was a student there at Cal Poly.
Our investigators spoke to their investigators. Multiple witnesses at the party said that Scott Peterson was not at the party, had never been to that house. So he was cleared.
They can't seem to catch a break, and as the case languishes, Paul Flores' mother and father say that, like their son, they're also being harassed by the community.
Ruben was regularly having convoys of people coming by his house, throwing rocks in his yard, yelling and screaming at him.
One man who was out shopping even posted a video on YouTube of an encounter with Ruben Flores and his son Paul.
This guy murdered Kristen Smart in Xavier Walmart, okay?
We're going to get you one of these days, Paul. You're going to be called to accounting for what you did, and it's not going to be in the afterlife, it's going to be in this life.
As this case unfolded over the years, I came to see it as almost a struggle or a tale of two mothers. One mother, Denise Smart, was refusing to let her daughter be forgotten. On the other side, you have Susan Flores, who was protective of her son, as Denise was vigilant in her determination to find her daughter.
Do you have any information as to where Kristen Smart's body is located?
Of course not.
So then, something happens that finally breaks the logjam in this investigation. There's a new sheriff. His name is Ian Parkinson, and he vows to really get to the bottom of what happened to Kristen.
I felt the family's pain. I felt that I could bring a fresh perspective to the case.
The first year of Parkinson's tenure, he actually more than quadrupled the amount of money and hours spent on investigating the case.
The sheriff ordered a full re-examination of all of the evidence in the case.
So a few years after Sheriff Parkinson comes into office, there's a search of the Cal Poly campus, and it's a big event.
Kristen Smart lived in that dorm right there. And now, 20 years later, investigators think it's possible that her body might be on that hillside, just a few hundred yards away.
A new lead suggested the hillside could be where Smart is buried. Under the blazing sun, the FBI evidence response team began a backbreaking process, searching the steep, rugged landscape.
We're hoping that we find something, and we're committed, not stopping until we're able to bring this to a closure.
This morning, a possible break in the 20-year mystery.
We found things of interest in there.
Police hope this is their big break, but now it's up to the crime lab to figure it out. Will they finally find Kristen Smart?
Another year goes by, another birthday passes, another family engagement passes, and I keep thinking about what I would tell my sister if I ever saw her again.
You walk outside at nighttime, it's cold, the moon's out, and you know there's a girl buried somewhere.
This giant P on the Cal Poly campus, it's a major landmark. It's been there, I think, about a century. You can't miss it when you come to campus. It's right behind the dormitories. And so that's why police are searching there in 2016.
The investigation has led us back here where it first began.
Investigators are now entering their third day of excavation on the Cal Poly campus.
Items of interest were found that included either animal or human remains.
Samples head to a forensic lab. The detectives here hope they've finally gotten a big break.
Proper identification of those remains may take some time. It could be ancient bones. It could be a lot of different things.
Unfortunately, we did not find any results, but we knew that at least we had checked that box.
Eventually, Paul moves to the city of San Pedro, which is South LA. It's a blue-collar neighborhood. The problem is, his past follows him wherever he goes.
Neighbors say they got a disturbing flyer with Flores' picture and allegations.
When he first moved, he was actually pretty nice. But then, everybody stopped talking to him when they got the notice.
Neighbors say that Flores, now 43 years old, lives alone, goes to work every day, and has been friendly. Frank Romero says he's going to be watching his next-door neighbor more closely.
If he'd done something in the past, he might do it again.
A possible break in a 23-year-old cold case, the disappearance of Kristen Smart.
Authorities executing several search warrants.
Today, investigators went into this house and searched it.
We seized a bunch of electronic data, laptops, phones, etc. from Paul's residence.
According to investigators, in his computer they found videos of Paul having sex with unconscious women. They're homemade videos.
And police say many of those videos were in a file with a simple label: practice.
He allegedly also frequented bars and bring women home, allegedly drug them and rape them.
Some of the girls were completely passed out. Tramadol and Flexeril were found in Paul Flores' home. We spoke to a doctor, and he said that if you mix those two together, you would definitely get a sedating effect.
That's exactly what we feared. He continued his predator behavior down in Los Angeles.
It's a bad piece of evidence because it shows a pattern, right? A pattern
What
of
does it
abuse,
show?
of drugging them, and of having sex with them.
It doesn't show a pattern of killing anybody.
Paul Flores was never charged in those cases, and the police investigation continued.
The appetite from the public for news of this case has always been there. It really ramped up when Chris Lambert began releasing episodes of his Your Own Backyard podcast.
Chris Lambert wasn't someone with an investigative background like a news reporter. He was a music producer, a musician.
He said he drove by a billboard every day and was like, how is this girl still not found?
It's been 23 years now. Kristen has been a missing person for longer than she was alive.
It became the #1 podcast for a period of time, and that means it was getting national attention. That's good for us. You have a lot of Cal Poly students that graduate Cal Poly and don't stay in this area, and maybe they knew something.
Chris was able to get a handful of women in Los Angeles County to come and speak to him about their interactions with Paul, which were very disturbing.
A woman I spoke to strongly suspects that she was drugged by Paul. At least one woman believes that Paul drugged her after she had already consented to having sex with him.
Some people are afraid to go to talk to law enforcement, A, because they've either had some negative interaction, or B, because they don't want their name out there. Chris was a perfect conduit for that.
I'm not just telling the story anymore at this point. I'm actively part of trying to push this forward.
One of the most important witnesses the podcast produces is a woman who was a teenager when she met Paul Flores.
Jennifer Hudson was at a skate ramp in San Luis Obispo, and Paul Flores showed up.
So the radio's on and we're kind of chatting. There was a public outreach commercial.
Information regarding Kristen Smart.
And Paula says that was a tease, and I go cigarette. And she's out under my ramp at my place in Wazda.
So out of the blue, a guy you don't know comments on a PSA about a missing young woman and says, basically, I killed her and buried her in my yard.
Right.
Did you discount what Paul Flores said as just like a young kid talking crap and not knowing what he's talking about?
No. It scared me enough that I never went back to that ramp, ever.
You didn't want to call the sheriff or FBI?
No, because I wasn't going to be Kristen. And we lived out in a very rural area.
You were worried that he would kill you too.
Right.
Did you ever feel any regret for not coming forward sooner?
Oh, every day. Every day. I played a pretty significant part in her parents living every parent's absolute worst nightmare.
By not coming forward.
Right. I've never been able to lay my head down in peace. And I deserve that. I 100% deserve that.
I don't know about that. I mean, you were just a scared kid. You were 16. That's a child.
Yeah, but what if?
Did you ever reach out to the Smarts?
No. I don't have the vocabulary to. Sorry just doesn't cut it. I knew at some point I was gonna have to, rectify it. Somehow. Sorry.
Finally, she does tell police what she knows about the case, and it's a huge breakthrough for the investigation.
The tide may be turning. New warrants, new technology, and a search for the ultimate clue. Could it be hiding in his own father's backyard?
I think it's very rare that somebody just disappears in thin air. We had to go back to the beginning, and that was, what did we recover for evidence?
Investigators were out early Wednesday morning searching the Arroyo Grande home of Susan Flores.
They find nothing useful at Paul's mother's house. 1 year later, a repeat search of Ruben Flores' home.
With a sealed search warrant in hand, investigators went to work at around 7:30 a.m.
What we had discovered during the previous search warrants was that we kept going back to White Court, and that was the home of Paul's father.
Ruben Flores had a roommate at the house at White Court, and that man does an interview for Chris Lambert's Your Own Backyard podcast.
And he tells his story about how Ruben would never allow anyone under that deck.
A plumber even reached out last year to tell me that he was once called to the house to fix a sink, and when he told Ruben he would need to access a pipe under the house, he was told to just forget the whole thing.
The plumber said they need to get down below the house in the crawl space, and Ruben said no, wouldn't let him in there.
With some of Chris Lambert's witnesses, we were able to develop enough probable cause to go to White Court and do a search underneath that deck.
People from all over the Central Coast gathered near Ruben Flores' home Tuesday, watching as detectives investigated the area for the second time in just under a month.
This search takes them under the deck. It's a deck that they've walked over time after time, and they've been standing, it turns out, right on top of the most important evidence they say they've had in 25 years. Where does this thing come in?
So this comes in as my personal specialty as how this technology can be adapted to archaeology.
We got two archaeologists, one that was an expert in ground penetrating radar.
Phil Haynes was one of them. You actually are the person who uses this machine to detect bodies hidden underground.
Yes, that is absolutely one application. And then what you can see in parallel on the left-hand side of the screen here is called the raw radargram. This is actually the image of the radio waves traveling underground. And as they encounter something, you can see they develop little peaks, little parabolas.
We wanted to check a couple locations on the property, and we also used canines again. We had a change in behavior alert underneath that desk.
Not a full alert, the dog doesn't give the strongest signal possible, but certainly interest in getting under that space. So, middle of grid 1, a big soil disturbance, and no obvious reason for it.
That's correct. We found an anomaly underneath the porch that measured approximately 4 feet by 6 feet. And it was between surface and, I believe, 4 feet underground as the approximate size, shape, and depth for clandestine burials.
Did you think, okay, we found the body?
I certainly thought we had a good chance.
And everybody was kind of watching, to see what was going to happen, and they started to dig. And the other archaeologist who specialized in really the burial sites got into the hole, and she started scraping away.
We get down to about 3 to 4 feet, and we find this strange staining in the soil.
Got down to that floor, the soil staining started to spread out more and more. And that was what became a red flag and an indicator for what might be triggering the radar unit.
Soil staining. That is when, I guess, a body decomposes in fluids?
Yes, that's only one explanation.
And at that point, I thought we found her. I mean, I got right down over the whole, I thought we found her.
Everyone at the dig is kind of holding their breath, then letting it out in disappointment. There was no body, no bones, just the stains. But the samples of the dirt head to a forensic lab. They're hoping for a result, and the one they get is the kind that turns a case around.
So I get back in my car, I start heading back, and I call the sheriff. I said, "Are you sitting down?"
I said, why? He said, "Sheriff, this is human blood." My heart just stopped, and all I could think of was, we finally caught our break.
And in those samples, we got more positive human blood and fibers that were black, red, and a grayish color, which Kristen was wearing black shorts, red shoes, and a gray tank top.
It's enough to finally get what they've desperately wanted since 1996, an arrest warrant. On April 13th, 2021, Paul Flores is finally arrested.
Charged of murder with zero bail.
Flores' 80-year-old father, Ruben Flores, also arrested today at his home in Arroyo Grande, accused of being an accessory to the crime.
The San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office arrested 44-year-old Paul Flores this morning. It was a very good feeling. It was a bit surreal.
It is alleged that Mr. Flores caused the death of Kristen Smart while in the commission of or attempted rape.
Not only do prosecutors believe that Paul Flores is a killer, but that his father helped him cover it up. Both defendants entered pleas of not guilty in court.
Susan Flores is not arrested or charged in the case. 2 arrests, yes, but now an even bigger hurdle to clear because prosecutors have a major issue here. They don't have one crucial piece of evidence, and that's Kristen's body.
This was my first no-body case. Very, very rare, very unusual.
So the case that's had so many ups and downs, so much frustration, comes to this. Will the prosecution's case be enough to get a guilty verdict?
This investigator told me that the problem was Law and Order on television, where you can perpetrate a crime, investigate the crime, prosecute the crime, and send away the criminal in the span of about 45 running minutes.
To protect the rights of the weak and voiceless? You're in contempt, Mr. McCoy. It's for the jury to see justice done.
And he says it just simply doesn't happen that way.
After 26 years, the Kristen Smart case is finally going to trial.
I remember the first day it was very busy because there was 2 juries in there, so it was a very full courtroom.
What makes this trial so unusual is you have one jury for Paul Flores and another jury for Ruben Flores, and they're sitting in the same courtroom at the same time, 2 different lawyers defending them.
We either try them separately, and we have one jury for each one in a separate case, or we try them together, and we pick 2 juries.
And the Smart family attended the trial every single day.
I can't imagine the pressure that Chris Purvell must have been under. He was tasked with trying to convict Paul Flores.
There's always pressure in any homicide because you have to be perfect as a prosecutor.
This is a no-body case, and he's going to trial based largely on circumstantial evidence, which is a lot more powerful than a lot of people believe.
I truly felt like this was a part of local history. It's a landmark day in this 26-year-old case, the Kristen Smart murder trial, beginning here in Salinas with opening statements made by both the prosecution as well as the defense.
Prosecutors and many of the witnesses wear a bit of purple to the trial. It was Kristen's favorite color.
Defense has no burden. I can just sit back. I don't have to make an opening statement. If the state doesn't make their case, you can just say, Okay, prove it. Prove it.
I wanted to express to the jury just how long it's been since they've heard from Kristen.
She told me she was going to call me Sunday.
So before cell phones, before internet and social media, they would wait for a phone call from Kristen every single Sunday. And that phone call was their time to catch up with her and to miss, at the start of the trial, 1,355, and at the end, 1,370. That's a lot of Sundays.
We also heard from several of the key witnesses that night that Kristen disappeared at the party that she was at.
Just about every other witness at the party testified that Kristen was incapacitated and couldn't walk.
They asked me this in court. Well, I don't remember seeing her drink. Ever.
I think the proof is overwhelming that she was drugged. Especially with how quickly she went from being completely sober at 10:30, 10:45 to 1 hour later, down in the grass, incapacitated, incoherent, can't move.
Maybe the most surprising and important witnesses Paul's jury gets to hear from are two women who the court identifies as Rhonda Doe and Sarah Doe. They testify about getting a drink from Paul and passing out. They describe waking up to Flores, having sex with them, which they never consented to.
I think it was absolutely critical because they said what Kristen couldn't. They told Kristen's story for Kristen.
The defense claims their testimony is irrelevant and remind the jury that Paul is not charged with those alleged crimes.
The defense, their main strategy was discrediting witnesses.
A strategy used by Paul Flores' attorney, Robert Sanger.
When you cross-examine a witness, your purpose is to discredit the witness, but you don't want to alienate the jury. You need the jury on your side.
When the Jane Does were testifying, he would talk about their drinking. So there was a layer of victim blaming to Sanger's questions.
Even though prosecutors were allowed to bring in the Doe's testimony during the Kristen Smart trial, ultimately there were no charges against Paul Flores in the LA County cases because of insufficient evidence.
Remember Jennifer Hudson, the teenager at the skate ramp back in 1996? She's the one who says Paul Flores confessed to her. She took the stand.
And you were picked apart by their attorneys.
Yes.
And that must have been brutal.
It made me rageful.
The defense went after Jennifer Hudson relentlessly. I mean, they basically attacked her. Both Robert Sanger and Harold Misick. They went after her credibility tooth and nail.
Right, you're defending a killer. You're gonna come at me for actions other people have taken?
The video of Paul Flores speaking with police soon after the disappearance was particularly troubling for him.
You lied to yourself, right? Oh, it's not really lies and fit. It's so minute, it's not. Well, I guess you can call it little white lies.
Only one jury got to see that interview.
Paul's police interview is just not relevant to Ruben's case.
Without a body, a critical component in Ruben Flores' case is convincing his jury that Kristen's body was hidden there and then moved away.
They were able to, through ground-penetrating radar, find what they felt like was the gravesite of Kristen Smart.
You find a body, or you find evidence of a body. Didn't find that at Ruben's, no matter what they tried to make you believe.
And that was also the same area that cadaver dogs had a change in behavior.
The dogs had a subtle change of behavior. Well, that's not an alert.
Prosecutors kept coming back to the cadaver dogs at trial because juries love cadaver dogs. They love this kind of evidence. This is the stuff juries eat up.
The cadaver dogs were pivotal to this case because in 1996 we had 4 dogs alert on Paul Flores' side of the room.
And what about the evidence presented by the prosecution from under Ruben's deck alleging marks of decomposition? They claim they found human blood in the dirt, but acknowledge there's no DNA to connect it to Kristen.
There's no objective physical evidence. None.
After After 12 long weeks, 2 separate juries, circumstantial evidence, and dozens of witnesses, it was time for what everyone, most importantly, the Smart family, had been waiting decades for: a verdict.
It was almost surreal. Paul Flores will learn his fate. The Smart family will finally learn if they're going to get justice for Kristen or not.
Oftentimes I'll see myself in a restaurant and I'll see mothers with their children, and I just wonder if they really appreciate.
How should she be remembered?
Someone who made such a difference in our lives, and someone who gave so much. She just didn't deserve this.
Tonight, 2 verdicts in a California case that made national news. When you walk in knowing a verdict is going to happen, you get this enormous rush of adrenaline.
We begin with breaking news. A more than 25-year-old murder case. Jury found 45-year-old Paul Flores guilty of her murder.
He murdered Kristen with zero remorse or concern. When I heard the verdict that Paul Flores was guilty of murder, I felt a sense of elation that we had accomplished it. I felt a sense of relief that the Smart family could finally have some semblance of justice for Kristen.
So what did convince Paul Flores' jury? Prosecutors always want to know that. Now, the jurors have never spoken on camera about what happened in the jury room until now. The jurors asked we not identify them by name.
It sure would have made life easier if the body was there, but I didn't need it to make the conviction.
I think the biggest for me was the dogs hitting on the bed. You know, where all the dorms in that place, and the dogs hit on his bed. Dogs don't lie.
I didn't know about that.
We watched that video 2 days. I mean, his body language in itself, he's pulling on his shirt and looking down and not really making eye contact.
You want to know if this was an accidental, horrible incident, or was he a predator? And he was a predator.
But there are 2 verdicts coming down, 2 juries. The son convicted, the father.
And unlike his son, Ruben Flores was found to be not guilty.
In our case, again, we had no objective physical evidence.
At Paul Flores' sentencing, you get a real sense of the pain the Smart family still feels every day.
This is a parent's worst nightmare. The disappearance and death of their child.
Well, I sat at home, staring at my sister, empty chair for over 26 years. Paul had the freedom to do whatever he wanted with his family. And he still is holding the key to the one thing I desperately want, my sister.
We will never rest until Kristen is properly laid to rest by her family. This fight is far from over. And I'm tormented by the thought of how she lost her life. Did a sexual deviant think his needs were greater than the value of her life? Did she cry for help that never came?
Mr. Flores, it is necessary to remove you from society so that you can no longer prey on and victimize women. You deserve to spend every day you have left behind bars.
While his son goes off in handcuffs, 25 years to life, Ruben Flores holds a news conference on the courthouse steps as a free man.
All that stuff they say is evidence. You look through it, and there is no evidence against anybody, me or Paul.
Well, the story, unfortunately, isn't over. And it will never be over until they find Kristen.
And every Memorial Day, another anniversary of the worst thing a parent can endure.
How's the beef, Kristen? Probably about 67 out. The sun's going down and
should have been here earlier, but I got my shoes, that's why.
Today is a day not really of joy. It's a day of relief that Kristen's voice was heard.
We're not happy because we don't have our daughter. We don't know where her remains are. So from that aspect, we don't have closure.
Love you, wish you were here. Bye.
And while the Smarts don't have Kristen's body, they did finally receive an apology from Cal Poly about how her disappearance was handled, which reads in part, "We are very sorry for what the Smart family has endured. We recognize that things should have been done differently." We should also add tonight that Paul Flores is appealing his conviction. That is our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm David Muir, and from all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.